NOS4A22, Book 2, Trust No One, Chapter 7, The Fight. There was a fight in Cami that was shared sentiment with Stu. They experienced soul pain. The closely grouped needles covering their spirit forms pierced every molecule of the essence of life. They were beginning to resist the change to becoming one with the darkness of actual hell that was deep in what the ancients called the lake of fire. Truth was much worse than what any depiction has ever begun to tell in stories of even the most accurate memories of revived death. This is because anyone who has been dead and revived from darkly evil experiences only can go so far into the pit of Hades. The abyss will either spit you out or fully digest you in a simple act of complete consumption. The only destination eventually is the bottom, after a 3-day descent into the center. This causes a ripple in time, space, and the waters of the earth once a conquered spirit soul has reached the bottom point. The moon reflects sunlight and causes the energy power to light the ocean with life from heavenly prismatic rays as the captured souls of the damned reach up one final time in a failed attempt to awaken from the eternal nightmare, to reach the stars that also twinkle from that same sunlight, resonating love from the Creator that has cast them down. We have to fight. We have to try to get out of this. Cami was sending her conscious brainwaves powerfully to Stu. You know we can't do that now. I think if you relax and give in, the pain will stop. Stu had already given up, but Cami wouldn't stop fighting until she was completely exhausted. When that time had come, they were no longer in control of their bodies, although there was an illusion implanted in the redesignation of their thought path patterns. This illusion was masterful in design. The illusion created a false sense of self-control, which allowed them to stay relaxed until their 3 days were up. They were about to pass through such foreign realms with incredibly odd design. Lamb was the grand architect of the outer realms of seemingly nothingness to the flesh and blood eye lens. The archaic wise men knew the intricate science of capturing light through precise lenses and scopes, which took hundreds of years to master between mothers, fathers, down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. By their fourth and fifth generations in the beginning of this early work, they began to develop devices for several different extra-dimensional outer realms and spaces, even the spaces in between. Unfortunately, these elements have been long-lost knowledge that still does exist, if people took the same measures of old. Newer methods and elements that have created technology and devices have been able to do many incredible things, but it means nothing when it comes to this far-gone archaic science and careful craft. Glasses and metals that had such particular components had been destroyed for hundreds and thousands of years. The information even hinting of these things is so rare and scarce that the few historians and scientists can only speculate with only beginnings of ideas to theorize. Just how did they do it? That was an unanswerable question, lost in time, far gone. How on earth could these things have been achieved so long ago? How foolish a question to those who see themselves as advanced as those old ones, as if they were gifted with some superior intelligence, when they themselves would have marveled at the greatness of those first most gifted minds of old. The glass they used had not only different components to it, but was fabricated in such an elaborate way, on top of the already complicated methods of their secretive alchemy and metal forging, things had become lost that were taught by the original evil entities. They had many names across the world, as well as many identities to different peoples. The underlying common truth to them and their census was the simple fact that they were evil embodied. The realms, however, are beautiful to look at if you yourself have not actually entered the realms, only looking from afar, through some rare and special lens. The ones who have these ancient devices in their possession are in contact with certain entities and have completely sold their souls to them, or already were chosen from birth. There are less than a dozen of these on Earth to give you an idea of how rare they are, although they certainly do exist. These are known as the Watchers of the Watchers. Only a few of them are guessed to most likely be in certain obvious places, like certain famous private observatories. The others are so hidden and lost to mankind that it would be dangerous to go looking, because those who even have the obvious guesses and those ones who obtain them would most certainly make those who sought their rare and priceless devices disappear without a trace, clue, or even a hint as to where they had gone after taking care of them. Just know that Cammy and Stu had no chance of retrieving their spirit souls. Their lives would come to an end through manipulation as the essence of their eternal spiritual beings descended. Although they were about to do some horrific acts of violence in these last 3 days, they would not be physically stopped, because the chemicals in their bodies now had activated in their minds a basic primal primitive exceeding ferocity that gave them supreme superhuman strength of the beasts of hell that awaited them. Their eyes would not register what was happening before them, as they would kill and destroy with utmost wrath and fury. So this sick twist of fate had enthralled them, throwing them into a new level of sickness and hopeless self-destructive evil. Stu and Cammy first stayed frozen in their tracks, unaware where they were in the flesh. There they stood in the middle of the street, as if they were staring at the sun, trying to become blind, or as if they were in a trance that was like that of the ancients who believed they were reaching enlightenment. Unfortunately, these beliefs have always been incorrect. In truth, all they were doing was blinding themselves, trapped in foolish madness, which leads to self-destruction and gives a false sense of wisdom. So, there they stood, watching the sun come up, after standing all throughout the night. Once the sun had risen enough to become fully visible in front of their path, they seemed to follow it. In the spirit realm, they sought a small crack in the fabric of time that was leaking this light into their dwindling eyes of their shared spirit. Not just their spiritual eyes, but their actual spirits were dwindling and already mostly distributed to these tiny hopeless creatures that would live such short lives. Then the fragmented, expelled pieces of their soul would forever wander and roam like a lost scapegoat in ancient pre-Christian God-fearing ritual. The scapegoat is the best term to describe what Stu and Cammy had become. Unfortunately, they had always been doomed to a miserable existence, as well as this most terrible fate and end. There was only one other option to escape a fate of this complete descent, although not completely. They could never at this point fully escape this completely. If they could get to a point of realization at the end of these 3 days or sooner, then they could see what they must do. If only Cammy and Stu could snap out of this great hold that this evil darkness had on them, then they would both see and realize that there was only one way to even partially escape the end that awaited them. A huge portion of their eternal spiritual essence was already lost and gone forever, same as the ancient lost knowledge that only a few eyes in the flesh have ever been able to see. If they happened to die in another way besides the chemical death that was putting an end to their lives regardless, they would be spared from a total dispersion of their souls, basically being ripped apart in spirit and thrown in pieces in every corner of existence. This truly is a most dreadful thought once one realizes that their spirit will no longer be theirs, and fate of the essence of what they once were is worse than being erased from existence. Lamb embodied only selfish, self-serving motive. There never was regard for anything other than his own desire to end life in the flesh while converting the path of innocent souls into an aimless, scattered mess of chaotic destruction. There would never be enough death for Lamb. So long as there was an earth occupied with human life, there would be a fire burning in Lamb with a desire to do these senseless things, same as the eternal lake of fire that awaited him when his time would come. These fires would never become extinguished. Never in time or in the spaces in between could these eternal fires ever die out. No, they wouldn't. The beginning of this tragedy is now told from this point. 3 days of duality had begun, walking in the flesh, conducting and carrying out the evil experienced in the netherworld of the spirit. Flesh and spirit walked side by side, yet in their own individual realm, unseen by one another. They are held together by the shared connection of feeling through love and hate. The scales are tipped by reversing emotion when love is perverted to hate and vice versa. When one loves hate and hates love. This could never be so for Cammy and Stu, because their love was real, even if their meetings were only supernatural or spiritual, and not in the flesh, if it had been so. Maybe it was always real in the flesh experience. Then again, because of their individual personal experiences that happened within their minds when the chemical changes by the drug substances ran their course, this could possibly explain the ultimate test of love and life and death. The ultimate trial and tribulation would prove to be fatal, regardless their soul's outcome. Either to be pulled down to the direct center of oblivion beyond the deepness of the eternal abyssal depths, through the bottom of the lake of fire, at the heart of eternal endless spiritual suffering, or they would go beyond the best of both worlds they knew to be pleasure. Beyond fucking and making love together in blissful, euphoric maelstrom, because they truly would be one, forever contained in the same essence, within the core of their nuclear fragment that is left at the very last second before their remnants have been taken and scattered, given over to the supernatural cosmic unseen evil forces that are stronger than ordinary sight. This most foul evil, that is Lamb, the appointer of doom. He is the one who has set them on the path to self-destruction. Now begins the story of their end. The story of both what they would see and what was really happening. Their road was not a road to them when they were on a road. The air was not even air to them. Stu and Cammy began constantly changing when they looked at themselves and each other, even though it was only in the dark and psychedelic spiritual realm. They seemed to others who witnessed their strange behavior to be a couple who were staring at each other in possessed abstract poses with twisted posture. Their eyes saw each other as twisted shapes that didn't make sense at best, changing into things that went beyond any sort of physical description. How could someone look like a smear of oil with fading colors that were smeared on transparent canvas? How could a body look like a gas cloud that was frozen, then melted, but then began to melt into a sparking glob of popping pus? Fragmented buildings of impossible design were around them and growing, seeming to grow through them and all around them, yet shrinking at the same time as they grew. The plants and trees in reality around them seemed to grow smaller and bigger at the same time somehow, shrinking and growing bigger. These same plants and trees, however, were majestic looking and beyond exotic in appearance. These same ordinary trees and bushes seemed to be so fascinating, like they were from another time forgotten or alien, not possibly from Earth, and they weren't. Lamb showed them things that did exist, both in another time, another world, and in his world still. All things not of the kingdom of God returned to him. These things were always lambs, as God had given earth to the devil since day one. These were the hard lessons Cammy and Stu learned before they died. These last moments, although were in a span of 3 sleepless days and nights, were a century to them in spiritual years within this dark realm. No one in their right mind could see the things Stu and Cammy could see, and if they could, they certainly could never live very long to tell the tale. They unknowingly became conditioned to withstand the psychological horror that was visually projected from the projector that was in their pineal gland. Their brains were basically on overload, yet the consistent chemical rituals they subjected themselves to somehow brought them to new superhuman heights, or inhuman depths rather. Carnivorous primal lust sent ferocity to never-before-seen acts of depravity. To say they were sick is a sick understatement. The pleasure they had relished in had infected their minds to the point of the most extreme evil, and miraculously enough, they repented after they had completely lost their minds to the same true evil that had overtaken them. Yet, this same evil hadn't completely taken their souls, although this ultimate evil had taken claim on their shared spirit. They had this chance to escape eternal punishment in the second death after being punished through this most intense hell. This was a most difficult hell because it was a mental hell, a prison in which there was no escape. There was no escape once you had gone too far, and they went further than any known human record has ever shown. Even the worst drug addicts never could achieve this level of psychedelia. There are records of ancient tribes who have achieved levels of meeting with Lamb, and many adventures through spiritual realms, but never to live through such a journey like this that lasts more than 2 days. 2 days is like 2 lifetimes in the spiritual dark realm. They were going beyond the realm and crossing over through deeper levels as Lamb sucked them in and down further each day until the 3rd day. Walking down the street, Cammy couldn't tell that Stu was by her side. The sidewalk's concrete tiles began to float upward and had hovered waist-high between them. Although Stu saw Cammy beside him as they walked down the street at a fast pace because Cammy was trying to hurry in a panic to get past the floating tiles, she couldn't recognize him there because to her, Stu was not Stu. He temporarily was a vapor that had solid diamond shapes within, that steamed from the panels which actually looked like small alien spacecrafts, and looked nothing like sidewalk pavement at all. This is how different their end reality had become. It is impossible to truly give the magnificently disturbing visuals justice in written form. There's no way to do this. The written description here is only a gateway from the beyond that had been documented by a mysterious source that has been guarded after the deliverer had been found dead outside of an IRS building in New York. How it reached this place is anyone's guess. The body was so badly burned from chemicals that they only could tell it was once a human from forensic study of the placement of the document and previous records of death caused by the chemical compound found with the human sludge. So these things kept happening to them over and over. It seemed to be the first time thousands of times because these occurrences were so shockingly traumatizing within their subconscious. Each experience and every moment was continuously pushed back deep within their memories out of naturally designed self-defensive biology. Each time a tree seemed to reach out and grab them was so shocking because they immediately forgot about it, and they forgot because they had to process the very next insane, unbelievable thing, like a bush that opened up like a firework burst. Imagine a bush having its parts burst open like a fireworks show, then having the wall next to you look like cascading entrails pouring out next to your feet, while the scaffolding on a building sprouting into crab-like legs, mixed with tarantula legs, mixed with alien-like technology with patterns that seemed like distorted hieroglyphs. For hours on their first day, they walked down the long sidewalk of Main Street. They would stop, stare at each other, and walk slowly, then at a normal pace, and then a fast-paced walk almost running. They spent an entire day that first day just trying to get to the end of a seemingly endless path. They encountered many extra-dimensional creatures. Each one was an illusion sent by Lamb to get them to do things. Each one was strategically placed in the grid of illusions, which were and weren't illusions. Everything Lamb possessed were half-truths. The lies that people tell themselves during a trip of hallucinations breathe life into the spirit realm that fills the lungs of the evil spirits and abomination creatures. Lies were the ultimate power of the sadist Lamb, the timeless follower and henchman of Satan. Yes, Satan himself. Lamb was the little worker behind the scenes of every terror, the worker in the shadows, always carefully weaving and mending the ancient things destroyed and once lost in our world that the devil had wanted to always keep and forever clinged to. The devil clings to his sins and builds himself up through his lusts and selfishness. Lamb feeds the devil. Yes, there are many, many demons, creatures, spirits, and beings who serve Satan. Whatever you want to call them. They are many shapes, forms, sizes, and varied masses of all kinds of matter that exist in the nether realm. Their form is not as we know a body to be. There are countless spirits that work as something we cannot understand. There are ones whose being exists at different locations spread out. To best describe their body is like this. Imagine a body that has something like a hive mind, but not exactly, because they are like counterparts that work together in unison, yet they are spread out. Some are spread out across miles. Some are scattered throughout universes, multiverse dimensions, and outer space extra dimensions that cannot be calculated as anything other than off the charts, as far as beyond the ends of what anyone comprehends to be infinity. There is a reality, or realities, that go beyond ad infinitum. To even begin to grasp this knowledge is to go far past madness of total insanity. So the bodies described go beyond these reaches, and they still operate in cooperation amongst themselves because these fragmented pieces are fragmented on purpose. That means they appear to the human mind as fragments, but this is the only way anyone can describe their bodies. These are not like variables of something. These bodies of spirit creatures have a much more mysterious way of operation in conjunction with their anatomy. So imagine, if you will, one creature of this nature. They have a piece of their being over here, another over there, one piece this way, and one over there. One part of their body in this direction and another in another direction. Each piece of their body is the same part of the body, yet not, because although they function as identical clones, they are not, because they were birthed from the same brooding place. Their head, as you can call it, is one head that projects its thoughts through waves and frequencies that go out like rays of the sun, but so much more powerful, as well as stealth and silently invisible. These wave frequencies go undetected by humans. The head of the spirit creature is like a liquid gas that can form hard as any known matter as it comes tightly together, and can spread loose as a dissipated atmosphere or ozone layer like oxygen evaporation. Clearer than water at times and darker than dark matter itself. This is the head that is over these creatures of spirit. Utterly terrifying if you can get to the level of madness necessary to witness their horror through the sight of the third eye. No one wants to have this perennial view. People have fantastical desires achieved on different drug and chemical trips. These things are the things that no one wants to encounter, not just because they are visually terrifying, not simply because they will destroy you in the most brutal fashion. It is because they will find you and leave you scattered as they are scattered. This is their nature. They work to further tear apart the shattered soul and leave your broken spirit that much more unmendable. This works directly for the evil cause of Lamb and the spirit of time and the spirit of eternal death. Suffering that doesn't die, as well as feeds the beast. The beast is the evil, dark, negative energy that needs to be fed in the darkness, that is always open and always waiting.